Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Life It Ahead podcast. I'm your host, Nick Rodriguez, and I'm thrilled to have you join us today. In this episode, we're diving into the dynamic world of change management and its critical role in creating exceptional employee and client experiences at Ahead. We'll be speaking with key leaders from our enterprise transformation team, our VP of Service Operations, and our president to unpack the strategies, principles, and real-world examples that have helped us empower our teams to adapt and thrive during times of transformation. Whether you're curious about how we navigate change or looking to gain insights into fostering resilience and adaptability, this episode will leave you inspired, informed, and ready to embrace change. Let's navigate transformation together. Welcome, listeners. I have Kelly and Bryan here with me today. Kelly and Bryan, how are you doing?
Yeah, great.
Happy Wednesday.
Yes, happy Wednesday. I don't know what day this episode will be released. Maybe it will also be Wednesday, and you get to enjoy that seamless experience. Kelly, you and I go back probably over 10 years. You were definitely here when I started Ahead. And Bryan, remind me, but I think you only started a year ago, maybe two.
Yeah, almost a year ago to the day.
Wow, almost a year ago. Awesome. So it's going to be awesome hearing both of your perspectives on change management here in Ahead and all the change that we've been through. But before we even get started, Kelly and Bryan, I'd love if you can introduce yourselves, your name, title, and a little bit about what you do here.
My name is Kelly Kennon. I have been at Ahead for about 15 years. I am currently the Senior Vice President of Enterprise Transformation, and the Enterprise Transformation Office is charged with helping to support the execution of Ahead's most strategic initiatives, including mergers and acquisitions. And on the fun side, I live in Bar Harbor, Maine, and I love getting out on the water and enjoying the beautiful coast that is Maine.
Bryan, how about you? What's your title, and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Bryan Krup. I'm Director of Organizational Change Management at Ahead. And like you said, almost a year now. And I think it was actually a year to this date that I remember talking to Kelly about the offer and just about the opportunity. So just really excited about the journey it's been so far. And you might be asking, okay, what is, change management? What do I do actually day to day? And the way I would describe it is, we'll get into this a little bit later, but it's really working with leaders on a daily basis about how do we navigate change effectively. And so if there's initiative, like Kelly said, related to our impact initiatives and our strategy around here's the way we're trying to transform our business to be more effective in the marketplace and to really deliver an exceptional experience for our employees. You really want to use change to work for us, not against us. So my day to day is really working around comms and training and stakeholder previews and engagement and just finding creative ways to keep people engaged throughout the process. Before working at Ahead, I worked a lot in consulting, employee engagement, and HR. And on the fun side, like Kelly said, I like to spend a lot of my spare time playing sports like golf and coaching and play with my 4 boys over at home. So that's a little more about me.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. And maybe the listeners are counting in if we say change over 100 times, reach out to me. Maybe I'll give you some bonus points. But we're going to be saying change a lot. And when we're talking about, organizational change management in general, like I think everyone has a different perception on what change means, right? Like change, we have open enrollment coming up. That's change for me. Maybe we're changing one of our tools or something like that. But then there's also like huge structural change. So I would love to, before we get started through some of our other questions, I'd love if each of you can kind of define like what does change management mean here at Ahead, and what does it mean to you personally?
So, change management to me, most foundationally, is considering the people side of change in parallel to designing the change itself. So, giving both equal weight, doing them both at the same time. And that can be training, it can be enablement, it can be a lot of things, but really thinking about how is this change going to impact our people and how do we make sure that they can be successful in this change.
Love that latter part. Absolutely. And Bryan, how about you?
Yeah, very aligned to what Kelly said. I think one of the things that I think about is impact. So if we think about an initiative or something we're trying to do is what is the impact? And yeah, this is a pun on kind of our impact strategy. So suffer from that. But what's the impact of what we're trying to do on the people who are involved in it? And if we're counting on certain people to run with this change long term, how do we best prepare them? And how do we best just enable them to carry that out? And so at the core, we kind of think about this idea that change management is about accepting that feelings are the facts. So it's really the way that people are involved and prepared early on, often throughout change, that really determines their level of buy-in and the way that we actually are able to realize the benefits of the initiative that we're trying to work on. So if we have a system change and people aren't involved in helping test it or kind of involved in helping think through the benefits of that change, then it's going to be kind of a partial reality of what the benefits were that we desired for that change. So that's, I think, just in short, it's really thinking through the impact of that early on and involving people throughout the process.
For sure. I find almost anything, it's just making sure people are involved. I think something that a lot of our employee base, and I would extend that beyond our four walls, is that transparency is just always so key, and making sure that people are in the know or are involved in that. Once you have their kind of involvement, they also get that buy-in. I think it's totally critical. We've kind of set the stage. What does organizational change management mean at Ahead and to each of us? And it's been a huge focus for Ahead. We'll call it in 2025, but Kelly, as you have said, we've experienced over 10 mergers and acquisitions. Ahead is very familiar with change. I'd love if we can if both of you can walk us through, what has the journey been like through OCM, and what was it like in 2024 to help set the stage?
I'm actually gonna go a little further back, right? So as you mentioned, I mean, Head's been in growth mode since, well, certainly since I joined in 2011. Things really accelerated in 2019 when Ahead began growing through acquisition. And this is when the dialogue around change fatigue really first started, and we labeled it M&A fatigue at the time. But last year, as we were in the midst of our 10th and largest integration, we were inventorying all of our in-flight change initiatives, and it was massive. It was over 60. And these were not small changes. These changes were impacting large groups of people, in a lot of cases, the same people at the same time. So, just to name a few, we were adding two new selling teams, we were changing our comp model across the board, and we were replatforming our business systems. And we're sitting there, we were trying to assign change practitioners to these initiatives, and we simply didn't have enough people. In fact, we had no dedicated internal change practitioners, although we do have some great ones in our service delivery organization. So we began leveraging help from Berkshire, our private equity partner. We hired a third-party company to support Project Phoenix. And so at the same time as we were making those investments, we decided to invest in Head's internal capability around the people side of change. Anna Zaid, who leads our talent development and employee experience groups, referred Bryan. And it was a long interview process, but Bryan really wowed us with his approach and his ideas. So, as we said, he came on board in October of 2024, and he has just been having an incredible impact over the past year. He and his team, which includes Amanda Katz, they have not only led change management efforts for our most strategic initiatives over the past year, think UEF, think SNAP, think delivered margin. At the same time, they've also built out and published an incredible playbook on Archie, which anyone can use to start leading change the ahead way.
I love that. And yeah, I mean, I'm going back to that things accelerating back in 2019, what you were saying. Yeah, definitely there. I remember that acquisition, and that's going into 2020. And if you time all the change that we were experiencing internally with all the change that was happening in the world at that time, like there's so many like external and internal factors to consider when you're going into like change and how everyone is experiencing it. I mean, like we've faced a lot of challenges to that. But it's so interesting when I talk with like my friends or people in my network and they're talking about some of this change. I'm like, you guys have an internal change office? Because you absolutely need one. Because I've seen what we've been doing over this past year and I'm just like really wowed by it. I'm like, anybody going through any of this big change, I'm like, you need people dedicated to this. Otherwise, like you're looking for like volunteer firefighters, and I just don't think it's going to have the impact that people want to have. And
That's right.
so, yeah. And so, Brian, you've been leading the effort to standardize and grow ahead change management capabilities. What have been some of the key milestones or lessons learned on this journey so far?
Yeah. Starting out, Kelly's been a huge help in this process, even during the interview process. It would just kind of setting the landscape of what the environment was coming into Ahead and just the fast-paced nature that we have and just how we like to go fast. We like to make impact. We like to really have a client-focused approach to how we deliver solutions. But that means that internally, there are things happening all the time. And I think with that being said, coming in, I knew when I first joined that I had to first listen and really understand before delivering on here's a playbook or here's what we're going to deliver. So I met with probably over 50 of our most senior leaders across the organization in partnership with Kelly, just to consolidate the themes of the landscape, what we're coming into from a change perspective. And then through listening to those leaders in terms of what's important to them, what's how we deliver on change in the past versus what our needs are going in the future, crafting a actionable charter framework and a playbook that is in line with research-backed change management practices that can really meet ahead where it's at. And in doing that, really building that foundation to advise on most critical impact initiatives and building out that organization-wide capability and change management. And so one of the key lessons that me and Kelly talk about this all the time is really how do we start small and build out from there. That's probably the biggest lesson for me personally. I'm not someone who usually is a start small kind of person. I'm usually like go big or go home. So it's been a learning experience for me as well during this journey. But it's been such a great journey so far over the last year in terms of how we build out not just the playbook, but then actually deploy that with initiatives in real time with leaders, with real projects and real problems, and with employees that are going through a lot. And so, how do we really help do that? And so, I think that constant reminder that start small, build out from there, take a moment to think about lessons learned and how we can continue to evolve this over time has been such a great journey.
For sure. I really like the start small lesson. I think even in kind of some of my personal interests, I really enjoy weightlifting. I'm not going in there trying to do my PR first thing, like right when I walk in, I'll blow my back out and then I'm not doing anything anymore, right? You got to do the warm up sets, you got to get your body into the motion, and then you can start stacking those plates and doing a lot more weight. So I really like that. There's two other things that you said that really stuck out to me. One, listening. I feel like you don't hear about listening too much. So it's really encouraging when you hear people putting that first, right? Making sure that we're listening. And the second is actionable. I,
Mm,
anytime I am working with anybody external to a head, one of the one of the biggest points that I always try to make is like, hey, whatever we're doing, it has to be actionable. If we're talking about a new strategy or a new technique or a new way of thinking, we need to give opportunities for people to take action with this. I find it to be very crucial to that learning. And it's how I learn. I'm a hands-on learner sort of thing. So if I hear about something, I need to put my hands on it. I need to try and I need to do it. I know we have some other questions, but I'm curious, what's some tips or advice you have for people who want to be listening more, but maybe they aren't? Like how should they approach that?
I think one of the things that we try to do, and this is actually a huge part of change management, is to lead with empathy. And when you lead with empathy, I think there's a natural part of curiosity that's involved. Where if I just take a moment and think about, hey, I'm curious if we're doing this and our objective is this, who is going to be involved in actually executing that? Who do we need to be involved to actually reinforce that longer term? And if I just start there, then listening actually becomes pretty easy because now I actually have to go understand what the perspective is in order to do the thing that we're setting out to do. And so I think that's part of what I try to do on a very recurring basis with all the projects that I'm on is actively listening, actively trying to get to the root cause of what we're trying to achieve, and then working backwards to the impact of who needs to be involved in that. And I think even like this, I guess, is the best practice in terms of anything, any initiative organization I've been a part of in the past is when people know that you're listening, they know that you care. And that's just an adage that I try to keep front and center every time in a conversation or an initiative is that the more I listen, the more I understand, the more I understand, the more I can help.
Absolutely. Kelly, I do want to get your thoughts on this too, but a really quick point, Brian. You and I met a couple times when we were talking about this episode. And this is really big for me. I need to know the people that I'm working with in order for us to have an effective collaboration. And it's not just what's your job. It's kind of like, hey, do you have a dog? Do you have a pet? Do you have a family? Do you have friends? Like, what do you like to do and stuff? And so our last call, you had actually, we spent the majority of it, the first half of it, just catching up and talking about some stuff. And when you do that, I feel like all those walls lower and I'm ready to like meet you wherever we need to meet at to go do something. So I always find it incredibly effective and I really appreciate it. And I think it's how we've been able to build such a quick relationship. Kelly, for people who are trying to like listen more, like what kind of advice do you have?
think it's similar to anything you're trying to be better at. It's just intentionality matters. So being intentional, making space for it, taking small steps, learning, pivoting. I think that could really be applied across a lot of things. But it's certainly important from a change management perspective, listening to the key stakeholders, listening to impacted users, understanding what the change is going to be from their perspective really helps you tailor a program that is going to be impactful for that audience.
Absolutely. Great advice. Listeners, if you're looking to listen a little more, we can try practicing some of that. Those are some actionable strategies that you can use for listening. So as I had growth, but like all the time, we're just always continuing to scale. What are some of the upcoming focus areas and initiatives that will help strengthen our approach to change management? And then how do you see these efforts shaping the employee experience long term?
Hmm. I think anchoring back to what we alluded to earlier was starting small. And I think one of the things that I had that we noticed early on is that we got to go big. We like to have fun with our things, like to have like splashy things, and that's great. But I think working backwards to that is like, how can we start in smaller pockets with things like user acceptance testing? How can we pilot things a little bit before we go live with something? How can we work on communication by persona or do training by persona to make sure that people in the right spaces are equipped before we have a go live? So we're really most ready for those things. And so one of the things that Kelly and I have been really actively working on is this idea of a change agent network. And how do we build out this pool of people by initiative that can really help us not only promote the message of the what's in it for me or the why or the key details of a change, but also help us think through the considerations by impacted group to flesh out what needs to be prepared before a go live. And so those some initial things that we've been trying to think through and trying to reinforce on a very regular basis so that let's really try to think through and involve the right people to help prepare for those go lives before we actually say we're going to go from 0 to 60. Let's go from 0 to 20. Let's go from 20 to 40 and kind of stage our way up to a launch event.
Agree with Brian 100%. Those are all really important things. And I think they all speak to driving consistency in how the organization navigates change. And consistency is so important. The employee experience should be consistently positive across changes, regardless of where they sit in the organization, who they report to. And to foster that, we have to continue to focus on building our maturity as an organization around change management.
Yes, it's really refreshing and awesome to hear that we are like, hey, employee experience, we need to make sure that this is consistently positive and everything. And so when we're thinking about that, I think we're thinking about a head's biggest value and differentiator, our people. And when you're focused on the people, like I feel like the success comes after that because people feel like they're taken care of. They feel like we're being empathetic to them and that we understand their challenges and that we're meeting them in their flow of work and making it really easy for them. When you do that start small kind of approach, you are able to be more agile and that when you need to make those changes, you need to be able to be moving at a speed that you can make those changes instead of crashing everything and then the employee experience is not a positive thing.
One thing on that, Nick, I think it's a great segue into this topic something we call the marathon effect in change management, where leaders often have weeks or months or quite a bit of time to think about a change, and they've gone from 0 to 20, from 20 to 40 on their own journey, and now they're at 60 miles an hour. They're ready to go big with this change, but the more that they can think about, okay, how do I now bring employees in my department or employees across these other functions up to the same speed, I know that's going to take some time. And I know it's also going to take some effort to really help them get up to that level. And so that's something that we like to think about from change managers. How do we reinforce that idea of the marathon effect early and often so that people and leaders are thinking about what's been my journey throughout so far? And if I think about my journey, think about, okay, what would the journey look like for someone in operations? What does the journey look like for someone in sales? And think about that journey and think about what actions need to happen. Again, going back to the actionable framework, actionable tools, things that we can do to help them along the way.
Yeah, we're talking about like actual frameworks and tools. I'm curious, like, what are some of the key tools and frameworks? I know actionable was one of the ways, but like diving a little more into that, what are some of the practices you leverage to foster that adaptability, that resilience, and that understanding among employees during change?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we do at the very beginning of a change process is, and the way this kind of happens, that there's a leader who reaches out to me or reach out to Kelly and we have a conversation and this introduction of like, hey, here's what we're trying to do. And from that, we do an intake process that really helps define the scope and the change narrative. And from there, we have this tool called the 4 Ps and kind of goes over the purpose. What's the what and what's the why of what we're doing? It goes over the picture of success in terms of how we're going to measure our success longer term. We go through the people side of it. Okay, now who is impacted of this? Who are we counting on to actually carry this change out? We have the idea of the plan. Okay, what is the actual plan of the key immediate actions that need to help us take some early steps to get momentum here going forward? So that's just one example of things we like to do very early on. There's another tool that we like to use later on. It's called the 4 Doors exercise when it gets to communication, where if we have an impacted group and we're getting stuck on, hey, there's some things that we don't know yet, and there's some things we do know, but we need to really help communicate and prepare this certain group. We can walk them through these four doors of things that we know are not changing. Then, okay, this is going to stay the same. Things that you didn't have before and still won't have before. But now we know this one thing or these couple of things are changing. And then we have some things that we don't really know the answers to yet, but we're working on those things. And here's what we're going to do to keep you updated on that. And like that's a very simple exercise I like to do with leaders, with employees to make sure that we can best articulate some of those things throughout the change.
Awesome. How about you, Kelly?
I would say one of the tools that has helped me the most, and I honestly didn't kind of get it in the beginning, is change impact assessment. So really breaking down the change into different components, identifying who's going to be impacted by those changes and how does it differ from their current state, what's the gap, and really understanding that at a very deep level so that you can tailor the experience for different audiences. That's something that I've found really helpful. Other tools that I like are FAQs and help forums because they expand the scale of support. They create more people who can support people through change and even allow for people to help each other, which I think is really great to see and really powerful.
Absolutely. And speaking of all the people that we're helping, like either understand or become change agents or helping people helping others, I'm curious, what's one of the most memorable or impactful moments you've experienced in helping employees navigate transformation?
Yeah, I think that for me, most recently we have something called the Unified Engagement Framework, or what we call the UEF, right? And this is really a framework for how we deliver value for our clients, but also a way that we can drive consistency across internal teams of here are the key steps we take from the early stages of identifying an opportunity to actually going to delivery and delivering outcomes for our clients. And really what kind of Kelly alluded to earlier is that we had an acquisition back in 2023, I think it was. It was our biggest one ever, or 2024 actually. It was our biggest one ever. And with that, we had a lot of different systems, we had a lot of different processes. And this was one of those areas of the aftermath of, hey, we have different approaches to how we're doing this kind of delivery model or this framework for how we're engaging clients. And we needed to kind of have a unified approach to that. So really working with our project leads to define that change narrative, to stand up a change agent network, to do communication enablement beforehand, to really help provide office hours and reinforcement to answer critical questions. And then most recently, reinforcing that change with a system that we called the pizza tracker that helped really reinforce the critical steps that follow the UEF in a system that people use day to day within Salesforce. And I think that's just been a really cool journey along the way to work within the business, to illustrate the impact of change management, to know that change is not a one size fits all, but also not a one and done kind of thing where just because you have a launch date doesn't mean it's over. It means that there's a longer journey, a longer path of reinforcement we have to take to make sure a change sticks. And we reinforce that over time. And so that's one of the things that I've really loved so far ahead, and one of the things that I've been excited to be part of.
Nice. How about you, Kelly?
Yeah. I would say one of the most rewarding things for me is to see employees who've joined ahead through M&A thrive. So think about that. These are people who they didn't apply, they didn't choose to join ahead, right? This is something that happened to them and we hope that ahead is a great place for them to be. But those individuals go through a very specific type of change. It's very emotional, a lot of transitions. They have to relearn an organization. They have to do integration activities while they have a day job. So, really seeing employees, really helping them navigate that transition, learn the ahead organization, and then really thrive beyond that, whether that's getting involved in networking communities like the ERGs or the communities of excellence, winning impact awards, getting promoted. That's very exciting and rewarding to see.
Absolutely. I'm right there on the same page with you, Kelly. My team manages the Impact Awards. So anytime we see some of these names, I'm like, oh yeah, they came from this company or whatever it is. It makes me feel like just very like homogenized. Like when you get in and you can be a part of it and you're participating in our systems and you're also getting recognized for the impact that you're having. It's just like, oh no, look, we are all ahead now. Like you were in this other organization, like you said, that not all the time people don't necessarily have a choice or voluntary, but we meet them in their flow of work. We show them the ways of how to get involved. And we also learn from them too, right? It's not always just the ahead way involves all the other ways of the other organizations that we've brought in. It's like the best of all these worlds that we've created.
100%. We are better together.
How do we make sure that like how does effective change management directly impact like the employee engagement and the morale and that sense of belonging? Like how do we take that approach to make sure that those people are set up to thrive?
One of the things that we like to do, and Kelly and I have talked about this before, but I think there's this adage that we kind of talked about earlier was that, like, change is working for us, not to us. And I think that that's one of the things that I think has been tried and true over time. And the way that actually plays out, though, is that when we talk about the early planning process and thinking through again that clarity of what we're trying to achieve, what the success measures are, who's going to be involved and impacted, then who are the stakeholders. That has a direct correlation into if I'm an employee and I'm the on the way downstream, but if I'm getting early on touch points with my manager or early on touch points with program leadership around, hey, here's a preview of what's to come. Here are some resources you have to do this process differently, or here to use the system differently. If I'm kind of getting those things ahead of time and I'm prepared, I'm involved, I know I understand what the vision is and I understand my part in that journey. I'm much more likely to maybe put some extra effort into that to make it work. I'm much more likely to ask those questions I have rather than being maybe more disengaged in that process. I think I compare that and contrast that to the idea of just being along for the ride. Like, okay, they're doing this thing. Maybe it impacts me, maybe it doesn't. I don't really know, but I'll only ask a question until it comes to me. And then even though I'm gonna maybe share some things or ask some questions to my team that they don't know the answers to either. And it really contrasts those different experiences where effective change management really does have a direct impact on the employee's experience and their ability to feel like, okay, what they've thought of me. Leaders have taken the time to be curious about my perspective and how I can be involved in the change journey. And to your point about belonging, that's something where now I feel like I belong. This is something where I feel included in the process and like I'm a part of the organization. And where I think where we've run into issues of attrition is where like, okay, you know what? They didn't take the time to involve me and now it impacts me directly, and now I can't do my job effectively, and that has a severe impact on engagement as well as attrition.
Yeah. How about you, Kelly?
I've seen firsthand that bad change management or no change management can not only derail an initiative, it can deflate teams. And in extreme cases, it can lead to talented people leaving. So, on the flip side, good change management, it engages people, it motivates people, it creates a sense of community, and it shows people that we can do hard things together.
Absolutely. You know, just kind of thinking about all this change that we're talking about and reflecting on this, I'm like, well, change is how we all got to a head. Like, we all changed a job or we changed a company or whatever it is. Like, we got here through change. We have opportunities that are uncovered through change. Like, I'm not getting additional opportunities within my role or able to expand unless something's changing, right? Or I'm making the change myself. So I find it very easy for me to embrace change. Heck, even earlier this year, my the neighbor's house caught on fire. The fire jumped to our place, and now I'm changing where I'm living. But then that's changed how the way I work or whatever it is. But it's kind of like how you navigate and embrace that change, and like these are things that you can kind of like seize and find opportunities within. And so, you know, if you could leave a headians with one piece of advice or insight about embracing change and thriving through transformation, you know, like what would it be?
Yeah, I think that I mean, I'm sorry to go first here, but I think one of the things that stands out to me, and this is something we just talked about yesterday, actually, Kelly, was that change is an opportunity. I think with any initiative or with any personal event that happens, there's an opportunity there. And whether or not we see the opportunity is really an effect of how well we think through, okay, what is my role in that change? And what are some things I can either learn throughout the process about myself or about the organization or about XYZ topic? And what are some ways I can be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem? And I think that every change and all the hairy things that come along with that change presents an opportunity for us to innovate, for us to find unique solutions. And I think if you think about any of the big companies, big products, big things that happen, there's things did not go the way that people imagined it to go at the very beginning, but they innovated throughout that journey to find the solution. And there was people involved in that process who took ownership around what could my role look like to find that opportunity.
That's awesome.
Mm. So I agree with you, Brian. I think it's about how you think about change. So you can take the stance that change is happening to you, or you can decide that the change is happening for you. So if you assume positive intent, if you lean in, it really does become an opportunity to learn and grow.
Great points. Honestly, talking about this reminds me of when my wife and I were redoing our master bathroom 2 or 3 years ago, and I was resisting that change. I had the perception that the change was happening to me, and it was preventing us from getting started. I was kind of like being a stick in the mud and trying to find ways to sabotage it in a way. And my wife just kind of worked with other people to get the trigger pulled and get the project started. And once I embraced it, once I got in there and I was helping with the demo, all of a sudden I could see the vision for this change. I could be a part of it. I could see where my part was in this and how I can have it positively affect. And like by the time we're halfway through the project, I was like, oh, Vicky, like I was looking at these lights and I think it would make like really good sense in here. And I'm like, how about an accent wall and like all this other stuff? And all of a sudden the whole narrative changed. It wasn't anymore like, oh, Nick, this is happening to you. You need to get in there and work. It was like, oh, Nick, no, dude, this is an opportunity to make this bathroom ours. Like, this is a way for us to do it sort of thing. And it totally 180'd it. And like, then at the end of it, I'm looking at it, I just have so much pride for the work that we put into it. And I'm like, we really accomplished something here. And it wouldn't have started if it weren't for my wife pushing it. And because I was in the way, I was kind of preventing something like that happening. It was one of the best things that we've done together. So I know it's not exactly work, but the change shows up in all sorts of ways.
100%. How so growing that bathroom still?
No, like, part of the fire took it out. But what was actually really cool, we just recently toured our place. It's stripped down to the studs. That tile's still in there that I put in there. And that was a point of pride for me. I got to look at that. I'm like, man, while we were in that change, the thing I resisted, I doubled down. I said, you know what? No, put your best foot forward. Let's do this. And that tile's still there. They demoed an entire unit, right? Not a crack in the tile, nothing had been affected by that. And I was like, man, really proud of my craftsmanship and my ability to embrace that change and make the most of it. I didn't half-ass anything. We went into it with a full heart and our full minds, and it was cool to see that. I'm missing it, but now I also have like, hey, we're redoing our whole place. I'm like, change, change, change. Like, we're gonna change this. We're gonna change that. I'm like really embracing it, and just kind of making sure that we have the vision for it, and that my wife and I are both involved in kind of making those decisions.
Yep. It's great.
Love that example.
Well, Kelly, hey, Brian, thank you so much for joining me today. I feel like there's so much change going on. I think sometimes people might not be resisting it or they might not fully understand it. I think this episode will help them have a better understanding about how much we care about the people that are involved in this change and how much of a people first approach we take to OCM. And so thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Thanks, Nick. Really enjoyed this chat and the opportunity.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Welcome back, listeners. Very exciting guest joining us today. We have Rich Falcone, president of Ahead, joining us. Rich, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. I've become familiar with who you are through our kickoff sessions. I really enjoy it, all of our town halls. But for the folks who are new to Ahead or listeners who don't know who you are, do you mind sharing a little background about yourself?
Sure. My name's Rich Falcone. I joined Ahead about 20 months ago through the acquisition of CDI. I was the CEO of CDI from 2019 until 2024. And prior to that, I held a variety of different roles from president to CRO, all the way back to when I was a crazy 25-year-old client director. So it's a great run, absolutely phenomenal experience, loved it, and could not be more excited to be part of the Ahead team right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Ahead's been super exciting the entire time I've also been here, but it's awesome to hear about kind of like your career path and how you got to where you're at today. Talking about as your role as the CEO of CDI and then now becoming the president of Ahead. That's one heck of a transition. I'm curious to get us started here. Like, how did you approach managing that change, both personally and organizationally? And what lessons did you learn that helped shape who you are and like your approach to this role today?
It's a great question. It was a very humbling experience. And I think probably the lesson that I learned the most personally was, like, I think I said this before in a different call, but when you have an acquisition and you've been a part of a company for a long time, if you had a genie, like an Aladdin genie bottle, and a genie came out and you could wish to go back to your old company, you probably make that wish. But then there's a day when you wouldn't make the wish. But that day isn't day two. Maybe it's day 3, day 10, could be 6 months. And I think that I didn't want that to be the case. It just emotionally was. And then I eventually did get to that day where like I didn't want to go back. But I think in hindsight, when I was CEO, we bought 8 companies. So I was on the other side of it 8 times from 2019 to 2022. And there's nothing like the actual experience. So even though I thought I could relate because we had been the acquirer 8 times, I think until you go through it. It's the first time I went through it. I think I learned a lot. And I think if it were to happen again, I'd be more prepared on the personal side. On the professional side, I think Ahead is an integration machine, does an absolutely phenomenal job, integrates the cultures, takes the best of both. I do think the change management piece of it was critical. And I think Bryan and his team, and that was a new function for me when they said we were going to do OCM. I literally Googled OCM. I didn't know what it was. I'm not kidding. And it's a phenomenal function within the organization. Obviously, it's new to Head, internally being launched. So I think just expectation setting for yourself and for the organization is the key to something like that.
Yeah, it's amazing what like a really good like OCM or like IMA integration management office can do for you to the point now when I have like friends or people in my network or, family who are talking about their organizations. They're like, oh, we're going through an acquisition or we're acquiring and being acquired. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, do you guys have an OCM? Like, and they're like, no. I'm like, oh my God. Like, I couldn't even imagine. It's so critical for us.
I think it's one of these things where if you never had it, you don't think you need it. And then once you have it, you always want it. Right. That's been my experience with just even just from a perspective of like keeping us honest, the communication management, the wording, the fact list, the FAQ, like there's all these things that, we may know we want to do, but we don't know how to do, or we don't know we need to do them. So you had asked about my career path, and if you Google and look at articles or press releases I've done, I had a saying that I still maintain, which is change or die. And I interviewed Michael Dell once, and I asked him what his advice to any new CEO would be, and he said that. That was after I had been sort of promoting it, and I think that mindset's key. I think that obviously it's a little bit of an intense phrase, but it's meant to provoke emotion. Like I think things are always evolving and always changing in our industry, and if you're not willing to change, our board president had a great line that I really like. He said, "There's three types of people in an organization. There is the people that drive the change, like the change wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for these people.
Hmm.
There's the people that accept the change, right? Like they endorse it, they accept it, they want to make it successful. And then there's the other person, right? Who doesn't really drive it or accept it. And that's okay if that happens, but then it might not be a fit anymore, right? Like maybe organizations outgrowing the person or vice versa, right? So I think change is good. I think you have to foster it, you have to manage it. And when it makes sense, you need to support it and adopt it, which I think it has done a phenomenal job. I think there's been a lot of change in the last, couple years on a lot of fronts from anything from go to market to AI. I mean, so much is happening that I think the organization's done a phenomenal job adopting change.
For sure, your change or die kind of resonates with me right now. So I've experienced a ton this year. I don't know how much it's going to show up in our podcast episodes, but like the neighbor's house caught on fire. My wife and I were expecting in November. We now are like the amount of change I've never have experienced before in my life. But a lot of people keep asking me, hey, how are you centering yourself, or what's kind of like keeping you going? And my catchphrase has been that the plan is that the plan will change. As long as you can embrace that and know that that change is coming, and you could fight the wave, but the waves win a lot of the times. Like you got to learn how to surf. You got to learn how to like go with it.
I also think there's like winds of change. I think like sometimes in your life, the change meter's up here and, other times it's stable, whatever that can mean for you personally and professionally. Like if I look at the last 2 years, there's a lot of change when we acquired 8 companies in 3 years. That was a lot of change. Then progressing from one role to another role to another role to CEO, like it's always been change, but its pace will kind of move around.
Yeah, yeah. So we've been talking about how critical like organizational change management has been for Head, especially in 2025. How do you see this focus on change like contributing to our organizational culture, and how does it make us like stand out as an employer of choice for top talent?
I'm probably not the first person to say that. I think AI is going to drive change probably as fast as the internet did when it first came out. For the younger people on the phone, I remember when the internet was basically hit my life when I was 22, 23 years old. I mean, and obviously that changed everything forever, right? So I think we don't know what we don't know with AI right now. I think we need to be willing to fail fast. I think progress over perfection is going to win the race here. It's moving so fast, it's changing so fast. So I think just accepting the fact that we don't know what we don't know. Like when the internet came out, could we have predicted what was going to happen? I mean, Google wasn't there yet. Of course not. So we don't know what we don't know right now. And I think, we just need to be willing to progress, not be obsessed with perfection, be willing to fail fast, and not be fearful of change. Like I have seen some comments like, oh, AI is going to take my job. And I subscribe to the theory that someone who uses AI might take someone's job. Right. And I don't mean that to be, I just think like you're going to have to leverage it and adopt it. But I think that's good. I wouldn't view that as a threat. So I think just having an open, honest conversation about, what that can drive for us internally, and whether that be efficiency or advancement or innovation on it and all that fun stuff. but like it's here, like it's not, you know what I mean? Like, my kids are trying to figure out how to manage it in school and what's cheating versus what's not cheating. And the policy's unclear. Like we're figuring out the basics right now, and I think,
Yeah.
let's just have fun with it.
Yeah, because I had done so much work in PowerPoint, it always kind of reminds me, it's like the people being like, no, we still need to paint boards and draw them and present them to clients. You're like, PowerPoint's right there, Canva's right there.
Yeah.
That change is happening, embrace it. And so we've been talking kind of about like change like internally, right? Like our OCM and everything, but it like change also impacts how we serve our clients and
Sure.
bring solutions to market. Like, can you share an example of how effective change management has elevated our go-to-market strategy or strengthened client relationships?
Well, from the go-to-market side, obviously we launched specialty sales, we launched a head sales university, we launched mid-market, we changed all the compensation plans. I mean, it was almost like we rebuilt the business. We had Project Phoenix, we changed all the systems and NetSuite and CRM and all these different things. And I think that forced us to take the best of the best. And I think our clients benefited from that, right? So if I look back at a very long story, but I think a great one, I think Ahead had a very mature, wide service catalog, very great things like DSG and Foundry and advanced security stuff CDI just didn't have. But it funneled it through a narrow sales channel, which is just the one sales force. And that's tough. CDI had a pretty wide front end with the multiple sales forces. So when we married those two things together, you asked about like how the clients got affected. The Ahead kind of legacy sellers got a lot of added selling bandwidth, right? Because they picked up these new sales forces to work with and deploy in their install base. And the legacy CDI sellers got a lot of added things in the catalog, different things to bring to their customers. And I think both sets of clients are really appreciating and that change and adopting it. And I think that shows up in, 20%, almost $1 billion of revenue growth in a year, which is unbelievable. So I think for the customers, it was a new go-to-market for some. For others, it was like new tools to play with and leverage. And I think everybody in the end, benefited from that. So I think the change has been recepted well. I mean, revenue isn't the only metric to say that you're doing a good job, but it's clearly a decent KPI. And I think, the way we're growing and the happiness and people are succeeding and having fun. So I think it was received well. It was a bit of an experiment, and I think we learned some lessons. We kept the progress over perfection mentality, and I think that benefited everybody.
For sure. Like when I think about when you describe it like that, recency bias here. I also know you're out of New York, but I'm going to make a reference to the LA Dodgers. It's
Oh,
like
no.
a show.
Man, yeah. Man, come on.
I know, but it's like someone who can pitch 10 strikeouts and hit 3 home runs. That's what you're describing here with the kind
Yeah.
of the integration that we had.
Well, if you want to say Ahead is the Shohei Ohtani, I'll take that one. Even though he's on a Met, I'll take that.
Yeah, game correct is respect game.
I mean, what he's doing is unbelievable. It's like the Babe Ruth era. He's pitching and hitting. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, totally. So as a leader who's experienced transformational change firsthand, right? Like your career role, like even like CEO to president, acquisition, all that stuff. What advice would you give to other leaders who are navigating change within their teams? Like how can they integrate maybe some change management principles into their leadership style or what have you?
That's a good question. I think my advice to whether it's a leader or not leader is like check your ego at the door. Like I think that people's like you brought up the CEO president thing. So I was a president, then I was a CEO of a $1 billion company. Now I'm a president. Like I don't get up and I'm like what I'm called is not like it's more what am I doing and am I having an impact? Like I don't. So I think you have to like try to not and not that but it's a human nature thing, right? To do so like really make a conscious effort to like this isn't about me. It's about like the impact I can have on the business. And if you approach it from that perspective, regardless of what you're called or how you progress, you probably will have success. So I would say like humble confidence is a tricky recipe, but if you can pull it off, it often can benefit you.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times what you're talking about in the title, like the title domain, it's like I don't think people are going to remember my title. I think people
No.
are going to remember how I made them feel or what they remember like my work being sort of thing. So it's like whatever my title was irrelevant. It's about the impact that I can have.
I mean, obviously it depends on your role, but over the years, and I've experienced this too, I've said to people, hey man, like you changed my life. Like you gave me this opportunity and XYZ happened and my whole, life changed. And it's a cool feeling to be on the other side of that. So I've done what I can hopefully to like really give people a platform, give them an opportunity and reward them both in all forms, right? Whether it's financial or recognition. And when you impact someone that way, it feels good for both parties and you develop a good relationship.
For sure. So as Ahead continues to grow and evolve, like how do you envision change management like shaping our future? Like what role do you see it playing in sustaining our culture, attracting top talent, and like driving business outcomes?
I mean, maybe this podcast is a good start, but I think we have to be a little louder about it, right? Like I'm sure there's a lot of
Mm.
people on this call or podcast that may be saying like, wait, what? I didn't even know. Like not because we didn't try, but like everybody's busy and running around. So I think like how to leverage it, where to leverage it, what is it, who do I contact, when do we use it, when do we not use it? I think we need to continue to improve answering those questions for everybody so people know where to turn, how to turn, and how to leverage. I think also Ahead is an acquisitive company, right? So I don't think another acquisition is out of the question. If we found the right business, I think if we would have had a fully built OCM function during the CDI integration, I think it would have been a little less chaotic. And that's nobody's fault. It was just a big integration. So I think having the OCM be at the heart of future integrations of acquisitions will be critical. I also think we'll see what comes down the road, but international expansion and even organic investment and developing our AI go to market, like there's a lot of stuff that's going to be moving, right? From acquisitions to AI to international expansion. And I think leveraging the OCM team and promoting it and not having it be like a secret in the background, right? So I think maybe this is like a good start to that. Like I said, I mean, cards on the table. I was in Chicago. They said we're bringing in an OCM team, and I Googled OCM. So that was so don't be embarrassed if you don't know what it is. All right, organizational change management. I had absolutely no idea, and I was running $1 billion company. So like I said, be humble about it, right? Learn something every day.
Yeah, I've always appreciated that perspective about you, where I feel like there's always room for growth, and you're always willing to like express these vulnerabilities around things, where it gives people the opportunity to say like, "Oh, I've experienced that too." Oh, so has Rich. And there was even something like this is so crazy, but like yesterday in our Chicago Teams chat, we've been trying to make sure that everyone it's a shared responsibility. Our offices, right? Like when you're in the kitchen, like we have dishwasher, we have all these other things, like just put it away. And so someone had left a plate out, and there was a photo of Dan posted putting dishes away in the dishwasher, and it's like, yo, if like anybody can do this, like we all got to pitch in. And it's kind of like those vulnerabilities where it's like, yeah, even I'm putting the
Well,
dishes away.
it's funny you brought up the trash thing. So, I was sort of raised at CDI, right? I joined there when I was 22
Mhm.
years old, and the founder Eric Baker and I are very close to this day. But it's funny you said that. He used to literally say, "Everybody can take out the trash, including me," and he would do it to, I guess, kind of, make a point and help out. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's true. I also think like you can learn from anybody. Like I'm in this office quite a bit, and there's a lot of people 20 some odd years younger than me. And, they got as much experience with AI as I do, right? It's all new for all of us. So I think you don't have to always learn top down. I think you can learn from next to you and around you and people you manage and things like that. You got to have an open mind about it.
Awesome. Rich, you absolutely crushed this. I learned so much and so quickly. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us a chance to be vulnerable, to ask questions, and to embrace change and kind of showing us how we can do it. So I appreciate you.
Well, maybe we'll stick with the philosophy, right? So change or die, and let's work on it together. And I think we got a great opportunity in front of us. I appreciate your time, Nick. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Welcome, listeners. We have Flavia back on the show again. And if you haven't had the opportunity, I highly encourage you to go listen to our Athletes in the Office episode, where Flavia talks about her experience as an Olympic swimmer. And she may or may not have answered questions about what life was like in the village. Flavia, welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
I am great. Thank you.
For the folks who either haven't listened to the show before or don't know who you are, do you mind doing a quick introduction for us?
Sure. Flavia Rigamonti. I've been at a head for just over 6 years. I'm in the Chicago office and I lead services operations. So we essentially support pre-sales and delivery for PS and MS across many aspects in order to deliver project contract at the best client experience.
Best client experience. I love it. My focus is best employee experience. I think that's just experience is a really important thing here at Ahead. And you saying that you've only worked here for 6 years, I'll say only 6 years. It feels like a lot longer. I feel like I've known you for maybe twice that amount of time. But man, what a ride so far, 6 years. I actually got to witness your role change a lot. You've had a lot of growth. I think change is inevitable, right? We all experience it here at Ahead. And kind of like, I'd love to hear your perspective on like what change and change management means to you because you've experienced so much of that in your 6 years here.
So I think that for me as a leader, change always represents an opportunity. I know it sounds like a major cliche, but it really is. There is change that is inevitable. So we can either choose to see the positive in it and embrace it and understand like what it can bring, and use it as an opportunity to challenge ourselves, not to just step up, but also understand how can this be better for me and for ahead, and take it to the next level, take ourselves to the next level. I think that it can be challenging because for me as a leader, I get engaged in conversations maybe early on and often, but the majority of people at a head don't. They see the tail end of this change process and they're like reacting to this change. So for me, change management is the process of how we make this experience better for the employee. Can't say that I've always been perfect, but it's a learning process for me as well. But I think we have an opportunity as well for us to make our people's lives better in this constant evolution that we go through.
Yeah, great points there. One of the things I want to circle back on is you're talking about it's not always perfect. And I think that's just part of innovation, right? One of our values, innovate. It's the idea of experimenting. I think a lot of times when we think of innovation, we think of that end result. We're like, oh, innovation. And then we have this really awesome product, really awesome feature, or really awesome experience, or whatever it is. And it's like, you, a lot of people don't have the insights into the incredibly terrible, difficult changes or like experiences that we created along the way that we learned from and then are now able to package that change or that final innovation into it. So how do you like keep your chin up during some of this stuff, or how do you make employees feel more involved in what that process is or feel like they know about it more?
I try to be as, in general, I try to be as transparent as I can. And I try to be honest. Like I come at it and I try to put myself in their shoes and what would I want to know? And do I have this knowledge, this information to give to this person at this time? And most of the time, the answer is no, unfortunately. We like at a head, we like to what, fly the plane while we build the wings. I forget what the expression is, but something like that.
Close enough.
Yeah. And oftentimes we would like to have the information, but I think trying to share as much as we can when we know it is probably a core principle. And we can always do better. We can always, I think one of the things that we can improve on is understanding how changes impact our teams and putting ourselves in their shoes and not just them as people, but also them in their role, in their day to day role. What is that evolution? And it's hard. It's hard to understand change from all these lenses. And sometimes like we don't know until we're on the ground. And when we do hit the ground, like what we can do as leaders or team members is support one another and bring a whole lot of over communication and empathy to the situations because everybody just lives through the change their own way. The best way we can do is inform and support.
I love that. I really like the empathy part of it too. One of the things I've actually changed myself this year as a leader is part of my one-on-ones and team meetings is a new section just called Next World. And I talk about maybe the things that I'm working on or some of the things that are in progress. I don't necessarily have like monumental updates. Oh, no, this is live or whatever it is. But like, I just want that, like, my team has expressed it wanting to know more about what I'm involved in or what we're working on. And for the sake of transparency, let's talk about it. Let's get it in there because I don't know what they can bring to the table. I don't know what perspectives they might have. I should be encouraging and fostering that a lot. And those are the opportunities that I get to do it. And so I feel like my team definitely feels like more involved and have a better sense of belonging during these times of transformations, even if it's a little thing like, oh, we're gonna change we're gonna change the carousel on Archie or something like that. But once they know, they feel like they're a part of it and that they're super supportive of it.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about some of the change management, you're talking about people all experience it differently. I have a marketing background, right? I'm now in DEI and EX, but like everything that I do, I see how marketing has a play in it. And a lot of this reminds me of just like, what is our positioning? How do we communicate what we're doing? And so how I talk about change to my leader is totally different how I might talk to about change to like my direct reports or maybe one of my peers or anything like that. How do you make sure that you're shifting like your positioning statements? Do you have like a messaging book or something that you usually use, or how do you like understand the different perspectives you're catering to?
I think it's a combination of research, trying to understand where people are coming from, trying to put myself like being able to put myself in their shoes is takes a lot of questions, asking them, asking like the rest of the team, like what's going on, how do we support the team? And then the other aspect of it is being an advocate. I think that being an advocate for my team, one, helps me elevate the conversation. And if there is something they need that I need to provide to them, like figure out where do I get that and enable and smooth things out for them as this change happens, and be there for them as answer questions, just having an open door. I think as a leader, I need to be able to enable support and remove obstacles and get what's needed so that we can get through this change quicker and with fewer bruises.
Yeah. Yes, I like fewer bruises. So, Flavia, you've been at the helm of some of the biggest change initiatives that I had, and one of the examples could be, like the UAF pizza tracker. Can you walk us through the initiative and share how change management has been a key enabler of its success?
The UEF and specifically the pizza tracker are one of the more recent initiatives that really touch so many different roles at a head. Like from sales to COS to the CSEs and SSEs into delivery and leaders on the delivery side. And in order for us to be able to get buy-in, we really had to understand how we could create something that can bring everybody on the same journey. And like from opportunity all the way to project, understand what the customers or our internal people needed. And that came from years of listening that may not have been able to respond to. From like, where's my stuff to who's this assigned to, or when can I get this back, or even how do we find the next deal from this project. And so we took what we heard, we took what we knew, and we essentially created a UEF. But that was just step one. Well, what needed to happen is we wanted to make sure and validate that our assumptions were right and that were transferable to the real world. So the change network for us, obviously the leadership team was and leadership buy-in was pivotal. But the change network was the group of people that we took a lot of our questions and that we engaged in testing so that they could give us that real life feedback. And the people that embraced this change agent role were so critical in helping us to understand how to evolve and still are. And the people that embraced the role were critical for not just for the project, but ultimately for the success of how people live through this pizza tracker day to day. It isn't perfect, like you said earlier, still isn't perfect. There's more room to grow. There's a lot of discussions that need to happen. There's data to be harnessed, but we couldn't get to this point without the feedback that came from the change agents.
Yeah. In my previous role, I did a lot of sales enablement, right? I worked directly with them and a lot of kind of earlier stages of what a sales cycle would be, or maybe in the later where we're doing kind of maybe more account expansion or something like that. And I remember very nascent stages of something like this. I think we already had like the delivery framework had already kind of been outlined. And it seems like we've taken already kind of a couple swings at trying to create something like this. How do we avoid like the burnout from those key stakeholders and like how do you get their buy-in and kind of them to believe that, hey, this time when we're doing it, it's going to be more effective, or it's going to work better?
So for us, I think that it was the confluence of different events that made the UEF possible, the right being at the right time. I think like the systems changed and like the role changes in the org, like being on the same systems, like it enabled us to say, hey, it's the right time to all come to the table, from sales to pre-sales to like solutions team to delivery. Like it allowed us to come to the table and say, like, how do we do this the right way? And that's how it started. But when it came to presenting it and get the buy-in, I think the why was the biggest needle mover. When we're able to explain to people why we do something and not just what we're doing, because oftentimes we get caught up in the what we're doing. You don't explain the why, like it's hard for people to understand what that's like the importance of it and the importance of it for themselves. So it's not just saying why, but it's also goes back to putting ourselves in their shoes. And what's in it for you? Like, why do you care? Or should you care? And even through that, it's hard because like people see the big picture, but then you have to like actually operationalize it on a day to day. And sometimes that why is not big enough to carry through the day to day and the complexity of rolling something out. So you have to continue to reinforce why this matters. You have to listen, you have to improve, and you have to leverage your change agents both as ears on the ground, but also as advocates for continuing to reinforce that why.
Yeah. So my next question was, I think you answered it a little bit here, but I think we can kind of dive a little deeper. My next question was going to be, large scale transformation requires balancing, high level strategy, on the ground execution, which is what you were just talking about, right? How do we make sure that why kind of bridges between both? And then you talked about the change agent network, and the question I was going to ask is, how do you ensure that change management principles are integrated in both the strategic planning and the day-to-day implementation of your initiatives? Like, in the context of your change network, like, how do you ensure that, like, you're listening to them, but that, like, still are kind of having that, like, consistency across everything that we're doing?
So I think as you start thinking about communications and change impact from the start, if you keep that lens throughout instead of, hey, we've done all the work and now we gotta communicate. Like if you keep that lens throughout, it helps you understand, like it gives you almost like a compass of who you should be talking to along the way. And that gives you data around, are you doing the right thing? Are you moving in the right direction? Do you need to change course? I think oftentimes we forget that, like, the importance of communication, and we think we do all the work. We do so much work. And then we lose the impact of that work because we don't have effective communication. And I
Mm.
include in that also like making sure that the people that know that they need to be communicating instead of just us as the worker bees that are working on these projects, like the people that really who is the person that should own the communication because to make it more impactful. And oftentimes that's managers and it's change agents. It's not me, it's not Brian, like is the people on the ground, the leaders on the ground, making sure that people understand the importance of that last mile and
Mm-hmm.
through thorough communication and ownership of that change and feedback, it's pivotal. So I think like thinking about it from that lens and making sure that it's not thought out like until the very end and making sure that people know like what is their role in that communication and that change. I think that's super important.
Yeah, totally. You're talking about like how to like the communications and who should be responsible for them. The managers, we have the change agents. Are you having like calls with all the managers and the change agents to like sit down and kind of walk them through it, or how are you equipping them to have these conversations?
I mean, for the UEF, we essentially had both. It wasn't an extensive number of calls. Like people are already like we're crazy busy, but we had several calls with both the managers and in making sure that they were bought in. We kept them up to date, but also with the change agents, especially around testing. And yeah, it was a lot of work. And we hope they got the message. I think it took a little while to get there, and some of they did, some they didn't. But yeah, it's a lot of work. That's why we have to think about it from the start so that it's planned out throughout. And luckily, we had Bryan to keep us honest on that. And
Mm.
otherwise, you get to the end, you have a deadline, and then you're like, wait, it's going to take a few passes in order for us to get to people. And we're going to need to say the same message a couple of times for them to hear like what we're trying to communicate. And that takes time.
Yeah.
And if it only comes from one voice, it takes even more time. So you need to build that network of leaders, managers, change agents, sponsors. Like you need a network to reach everybody all the way to the ground. And that network needs to be working together. If it's just one,
Yeah.
it won't get to the people. And then if we don't get to communicate to people effectively, then we create friction and we create resistance to change and lack of understanding and lack of knowing why. So it at a company like Ahead, at a size that we are, we need that network of people to be engaged in change so that we can get past with fewer bruises quicker.
For sure. I really like the network that you're talking about. And it's not just like the people that you pick as change agents. It's like leaders, sponsors, other individual contributors who have demonstrated that they can see the success from this or whatever, and turning them all into champions. I find that's one of my favorite ways to implement change sometimes, because you might have like an A to B conversation, it doesn't work, and you're like, all right, cool. Who are the people who are like surrounding you? Can I have all other conversations with that, to the point where, fine, maybe it's not that, maybe that voice or that message coming from me isn't going to work, but it might work better coming from someone else. And that's when it's almost like with our clients, like, hey, we can tell you that we're the best, but you should hear from other people who are just like you that are also saying the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's oftentimes people, and I think this is people in general, not only at a head, but we tend to delegate communication to somebody else, we forward, and we don't understand that we are part of that network of change, even in our role, even if we're not, you don't have to know everything to support change and support your people. Because at the end of the day, it pays off by a better employee experience altogether. That's the reward.
For sure. So the change, like we said at the very beginning, it is inevitable. We are currently experiencing it. We will continue to experience it. What have you learned about yourself throughout all this change?
I think a takeaway is we are all empowered to be part of the change. We don't have to be reacting to the change. We can be part of it. And it's not easy, but I think that if we embrace it and we see the opportunity, even as individual contributors, hearing change for the first time, like I think that if we see the opportunity that change can bring to us, we can get more out of it. And if we don't understand it, then it's okay. We're all here like for the same common good. We need to be able to ask questions and elevate the question of, hey, why is this change? What can I do? What can I do to understand how this impacts my role? And maybe we ask these questions that bring up great points that haven't been thought about.
Absolutely. I love change. I think it does create all those opportunities, right? We're very fortunate, I think, at Ahead to have a lot of change happening pretty frequently. And I think it creates a lot of opportunities. The people who are asking the questions or raising their hand or getting involved, embracing that change, I find that's a way to thrive. And it also embodies our values, right? We were talking about innovating earlier. Well, change, innovation's part of that. But asking those questions and finding out, can I add my input or my perspective, or like, how can I embrace this change? That's part of growth. That's one of our other values. And so if we aren't like change is part of that. If you like innovation and growth, change is one of the key ingredients. So I think if you're here at Ahead, I know we asked Flavia for her advice, but my advice is like lean in. People will notice. It's definitely really impactful. And if you want to seize that change and take control of your path and have that input on it, you'll probably be tapped on the shoulder by Flavia to get into the change network. So
Amen to that.
absolutely. Well, Flavia, it's been awesome having you on the podcast. We're going to have to find another reason to get you on here because you're one of my favorite guests. Thank you so much for your perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Life at Ahead podcast. We hope our conversations gave you fresh perspectives on the importance of effective change management in building a resilient culture and empowering people to thrive during transformation. Change isn't just about processes, it's about people. And at Ahead, we're committed to supporting our teams and fostering a sense of belonging every step of the way. Don't forget to subscribe for more insightful episodes, and let's continue growing, adapting, and leading together. As always, stay tuned, stay well, and stay ahead. Aheadians.